Hello, welcome to this introductory video for TwistedBrush Blob Studio. You notice here I have version 1.19 that's being used. If you have an earlier version and trying to follow along with this video, I recommend you uh, install the update and get this version or something later because the brush names and even how they respond have changed a bit. So in this video I just want to give a introduction to Blob Studio, its use, and some of the brushes and how you may want to use them to create elements that you may want to import into other art programs. So when I say elements, or you can call them objects, the main idea here, which is similar to Liquid Studio, if you've seen that video or program as well from Pixarra, is to have a tool to create not necessarily a complete image, but elements that you may put into other images, similar to what you may do with a 3D graphics program where you're creating objects to create a bigger scene. The same could be said for this. However, you can make complete images as well, but maybe that's not the target. And just a quick overview of the interface here. Up in the upper left is a preview area. Below that, you have the brush size, opacity, and density. Density is enabled depending upon the brush you have. Bottom left, we have the brush palette. If you click on a selected brush, it pulls up a full art set. If you click on the little arrow, pulls up a flyout pop-up menu. In here at the bottom you can see there's additional art sets as well. Some of these brushes are already from these other art sets are already in this default set of brushes. Layers are up over here in the upper right. Color adjustments and most recently used colors down here at the bottom. So what I'll do here, just to give an idea of how to use some of the brushes and the basic concepts of Blob Studio, is just draw a quick object. And one thing to keep in mind with Blob Studio, and I'll contrast this to Liquid Studio, where in Liquid Studio you were creating a silhouette and then coloring that in, painting it, and shading it manually. In Blob Studio, it takes it a step further. You're not creating just the silhouette, you're creating the entire luminance of your object as a first step, and then after that you are painting it or continuing to shape it further and modify it after painting it. So let's get started. I'm going to click up here to create a new layer because I already know I'm going to do something else in the layer below. So you can see when I'm drawing here, it's creating a shaded object already, rather than like I was contrasting to Liquid Studio where it was just silhouette. Here it's actually shaded, and the more you draw, the highlight will appear in that area that where you've applied more paint. I'm going to go to the layer below and do something similar and go back up to the top layer. So that was just with the blob add. That's adding new material to your object. What I'm going to do now is go to the blob smoother, and I'm going to shape this a bit. And go down to the area below and also shape that as well. So similar to Liquid Studio, the idea here is you're able to continually modify and shape your objects similar to as if you were modeling something with clay or in a 3D program. So here we've quickly created a mushroom with the luminance values. next step is to go and paint it. So I'm going to select basic paint, and I'll do a fantasy style mushroom here. Let's give that a bright red, brighter red. Actually, let's even go brighter. So you can see I was able to paint and paint again without changing any of the shading, and that's one of the strengths of Blob Studio, is once you have your luminance model created, you can then paint and repaint and continue to modify your objects. Selecting the layer below and the stem, let's modify that a bit, or paint that. Go back up to the top, make this a little smaller. So you can see as I'm painting these little white spots, as you go further away from where the highlight is, it gets shaded into the dark. So like I was saying, the idea here with Blob Studio is you don't need to worry about the shading once you've created your model. You can paint it, and the shading occurs automatically based on the model you've already created. So what I'm going to do now is go to this blob shadow. So I want to detail a little bit more. I want to add a shadow underneath here. Let's make it a little bit stronger. And go to the top layer and also add a little bit more shading as well over here. So now, as I was saying before, you can go to this blob model smoother and continue to modify and shape. And there's a couple key things to point out here in some of the brushes. Let me pull up the art set and give a quick overview. Up here in the upper left, there's a series of blob add brushes. These are adding new material. Blob subtract is subtracting or erasing material. Highlight and shadow, these two categories of blob brushes, don't add material to the object, but they add shading. So as you saw when I was doing the shadow, it was only modifying the interior of the object, not beyond its border. And the same would be true for the highlight brushes. On the bottom here, there's three categories of brushes as well: model, surface, and object. The distinction here is model will allow you to modify the actual luminance of the object, the shading. So here you can see I can destructively move things around, but see, the key thing to point out here, it's not changing any of what's been painted. So that remains. So even though you can go ahead and shape your object, what you've painted underneath on top of it remains. And you could do that with any of the brushes that have this model keyword. So here I'll pick the smoother and then go back and smooth it out a bit. Now the difference here, if I go into Blob Surface Shaper, you can see that won't go beyond what you've already painted for the edge of that object. And as well, what you've painted remains unchanged. And then to the blob objects. These actually go and modify not just the object in the shading, but also what you've painted destructively. So in order to get that back, now you would actually have to undo, which is what I'm doing with Control-Z. So going back to the blob shadow, we'll just add back in some of that shadow quickly. It won't be perfect, I'm just doing it very fast. Could add more highlight here, may already be at full, which is kind of a key thing and will lead me into the next part of this tutorial or introduction. See here, I've picked Blob Highlight, or I can pick Blob Add, and you see nothing else is happening. It's reached its maximum for this object, but it's the maximum for this style. So let me go to a new page here of something I've already created. So here we have a pair which was created in Blob Studio with 4 layers. The background layer, which typically is hidden, at least the default it's hidden. I enabled it here just to draw a background color and a shadow. But normally you may have that hidden. Then 3 layers used for the actual blobs, which is the leaf, the stem, and the pear. So going back to this concept of styles. So right now we have a default style selected. And that means the shading that's used in this object is based on the style. Now if I pick something else, such as muted, you could see it's a different style. I didn't have to redraw anything. It's changed the shading based on the style I selected. Or I can select full range, which is actually a full range of shading. And you can see here there's a number of different styles that can be selected. Here I'll pick soft light, which is has very little shading and goes to a brighter luminance altogether. So it gives you presentation capabilities once you've created your object as well. And this isn't a 3D program. It's definitely 2D, but it borrows some of the concepts such as shading and being able to dynamically change some of that. Let's switch to one more new page here. There's a few more features just to point out that are unique to Blob Studio and perhaps extended beyond what you may be familiar with in TwistedBrush Pro Studio. So here I still have the blob add selected, and you can see drawing a simple blob shape. I'm going to undo that. Now go to the symmetry and pick horizontal. Now the brushes all are horizontally mirrored. And you can see you could start to use that for some things like the initial stages of drawing a face. And the nice thing about the symmetry here is global, so you can go to a different brush and you can see the symmetry remains. And it applies also for the painting brushes as well as anything else, all the other brushes that are included in Blob Studio. Beyond that, there's a lot of other features that may already be familiar with those who have used other TwistedBrush programs. Masking, zooming in and out, undo, redo up here. The same method of controlling the views to zoom in and out, and etc. And being able to save to export. And always key to keep in mind in TwistedBrush and all of its variants, there's a page explorer, so all your work is saved automatically. You can export it to standard file types if you want, save image to file, but it's not necessary. As soon as you switch to a new page, here I'm hitting the page up key on my keyboard, I switched to a new page. It means it saved what I was working on. So you can go back quickly and go to multiple pages in your book. It's called in TwistedBrush, without needing to manually go and save each and every page that you're working on. So that's a quick introduction to Blob Studio and how it can be used. Thank you.